Racist teacher humiliates black girl, but when the student reveals who she really is, the teacher's reaction is shocking. Duda entered the classroom with her heart racing. The aroma of breakfast mixed with the smell of old books enveloped her, but nothing felt normal. The gaze of Professor Clarice Almeida followed her like a heavy shadow. Clarice, a middle-aged woman with perfectly straightened hair and an imposing posture, sat at her desk, her cold, evaluative eyes revealing the disdain she few. Duda sensed that with each step she took, the weight of the teacher's gaze became more oppressive. "Good morning, class. Today we're going to talk about civil rights," announced Clarice, trying to sound enthusiastic. Duda took her seat, but couldn't shake the feeling that Clarice was about to strike. When the teacher began discussing leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, her comments dripped with sarcasm. "Oh yes, let's talk about the fight for equality, as if that really change. Do you really believe that words can change the world?" Murmurs of discontent spread among the students, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others appearing uncomfortable with the teacher's attitude. Duda, who had always admired historical figures that fought for justice and equality, felt a wave of indignation. She raised her hand, determined to speak up. "Actually, Professor, words do have power. Their struggle brought significant changes to society." Clarice's gaze met Duda's, and her. "Oh, Duda, always so idealistic. Let's see if you can maintain that optimism until the end of the school year." Duda's heart raced. She lowered her head, trying to contain the anger boiling inside her. After class, she found Andre, her longtime friend, waiting in the hallway. "Duda, did you see the way she looked at you?" "That was unnecessary," said Andre, shaking his head in disapproval. "I can't believe she said that in front of everyone. You should have said more." "I know, but—" Duda hesitated, looking down at the floor. "It's hard when it feels like she's always waiting for the right moment to attack me. I feel like she doesn't see me as a student, but as a problem." Andre looked closely at her, concerned. "You need to do something. You can't just let this go. If she's being unfair, more people need to know. Let's talk to other students." Duda smiled, but her insecurity still dominated her. "Do you really think that would make a difference? What if they don't care? What do I do if it all comes back to haunt me?" Andre stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Duda, you are strong, and you're not alone. I'm here with you, and many others are too. We have to find a way to show the truth." As they talked, Duda felt their friendship strengthening. Andre had always supported her, but now it seemed he was willing to stand by her side. However, a part of her still hesitated, fearing the consequences of opposing Clarice. The teacher was respected by some, and feared by many. Duda took a deep breath, deciding she needed more than just comforting words. She needed a plan, something that could finally reveal the truth behind the silence surrounding her struggle. Professor Clarice Almeida sat at her desk, looking out the classroom window as autumn leaves danced in the wind. The sunlight filtered through the glass, but it couldn't illuminate her heart. In fact, she was immersed in a whirlwind of memories that haunted her since childhood. As her students discussed what they had learned about civil rights, her mind wandered back to darker times. In a flashback, Clarice saw herself as a 10-year-old girl, wearing a simple, dirty dress in the narrow, poorly lit kitchen of her home. Her mother, a hard-working and resilient woman, taught her that the world was a cruel place that wouldn't offer favors to anyone. "You need to work hard, Clarice. No one will give you anything. Individual effort is the only way to success," her mother said as she washed pots in a sink full of hot, soapy water. The girl listened intently, absorbing each word as if they were absolute truths. It was this mindset that shaped her worldview, but also blinded her to the injustices around her. Back in the present, Duda was in the school library, surrounded by friends and some students who also felt misunderstood. The frustration with Clarice's comments still burned within her, and now it seemed her anger had transformed into determination. "We can't let this continue," Duda said, her voice firm. "We need to unite and show everyone what's happening. It's not just about me, it's about all of us." One of the students in the group, Tiago, hesitated. "But what if the teacher retaliates? She has a lot of power here. No one will believe us." Duda looked at him, her gaze resolute. "If we do nothing, she wins. Silence only strengthens her. We need to take action." As they discussed what to do, Duda remembered an old book she had found on a forgotten shelf in the library. "I found a book about resistance and injustice," she said, her eyes shining with the idea. "Maybe it has some stories that will inspire us and help show the truth about Clarice." The students became excited about the idea, and Duda decided she needed to read more about the historical figures who fought against oppression. She went to the shelf, grabbed the book and began to flip through it. It contained accounts of activists, community leaders, and ordinary people who stood up against injustice. One particular quote caught her attention. "Change begins when someone decides not to stay silent." Duda was determined. From that moment on, she not only wanted to defend herself, but also to fight for everyone who had suffered under Clarice's critical gaze. "We need to document everything," she told her friends. "Let's collect evidence of what happens in class. If we have proof, they won't be able to ignore us." Before we continue with this gripping story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future tales. And let us know in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Meanwhile, Clarice in her classroom continued to be consumed by the shadows of her childhood. Deep down, she knew that her aggressive and sarcastic demeanor could be seen as a way to protect her identity, but she was increasingly aware that she was losing herself. When she looked at Duda, she felt a mix of envy and anger. The student was full of life and courage, something she had lost over the years. "Why do you always have to stand out, Duda? Why can't you just be like everyone else and accept your place?" Clarice thought, unaware that her own insecurity was fueling her hostility. Meanwhile, Duda, immersed in her readings and conversations, was about to embark on a journey that would change not only her life, but the lives of many others at the school. The silence that once threatened her would now become her most powerful weapon. Duda had always felt a bit out of place in Andre's home, but at the same time their friendship was a safe haven. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, she decided to visit him, eager to share her frustrations about Professor Clarice. As soon as she entered the living room, she was greeted with a warm smile, a small relief amidst the emotional storm surrounding her. "Hey, Duda, I'm so glad you came." Andre greeted her, closing the book he had been reading. "I was thinking about you. How are things at school?" "Terrible," Duda replied, letting out a heavy sigh. "Clarice just won't stop attacking me. It's like she's determined to make me feel less than I am." Andre frowned, concerned. "Seriously? What did she do now?" "She cut me off while I was talking about civil rights. And when I answered a question correctly, she just ignored me. It's like I don't exist to her except when she wants to belittle me," Duda said, her voice trembling with indignation. "That's ridiculous. You're one of the brightest students in the class," Andre exclaimed, crossing his arms. "You should tell someone." "And do what? Add more fuel to the fire? I don't want to be seen as the complaining student. Besides, my dad would say I should handle this on my own. I don't want to create more problems for myself," Duda replied, shaking her head, a look of frustration on her face. "But you're not alone, Duda. I'm here," Andre insisted, trying to comfort her. "What if we gathered some evidence? Other people must have gone through the same thing." The idea made Duda's heart race. "Maybe, if we can show that I'm not the only one, things might change. But we need to be careful. Clarice is manipulative and could make it seem like we're making everything up." As they talked, Duda couldn't help but notice the atmosphere in Andre's house. His parents' demeanor often formed an invisible barrier that separated the two young friends. When Andre's mother, Donna Alicia, entered the room, Duda felt the shift in energy. The woman had a protective aura, and for a moment, Duda questioned whether she was truly welcome there. "Hi, Duda. How are you?" Donna Alicia asked with a smile, but her expression quickly changed as she sensed the tension in the air. "I'm fine, thanks," Duda replied, forcing a smile. "You know you can count on us for anything, right?" Donna Alicia said, but there was an unspoken subtext that Duda couldn't ignore. It was an offer, but also a gentle reminder that their friendship might not be accepted by everyone. "Of course, thank you," Duda murmured, feeling a bit out of place. The visit had started so well, but now the tension hung in the air. After Donna Alicia left, Duda and Andre sat at the table, surrounded by books and notes. "We need a plan," Duda said, her gaze determined. "If we're going to do this, we need concrete evidence. I want to talk to other students. They need to know they're not alone." "Yes, let's do it. I'll talk to some friends and see what they think about what's happening," Andre suggested, excited about the idea. "I think we can create a group to discuss and document the reports." Duda smiled, feeling a little more hopeful. "Exactly. And what if we found a safe place to meet? The library might be good, but maybe we need a space where we can feel comfortable talking." "I agree. Let's set a date and invite everyone." "Who knows, this could help us gain strength," Andre agreed, his eyes shining with the possibility of change. With a new sense of purpose, Duda said goodbye to Andre at the end of the afternoon, her heart beating with determination to take action. She was not alone in this fight. The voices that had remained silent would now begin to unite, and Duda was ready to be the catalyst for this change. As she left his house, she looked up at the sky, already imagining the conversations to come and the truths that would finally be revealed. It was time to break the silence. Duda and Andrei met in a secluded corner of the library, surrounded by shelves full of books. The tranquil environment contrasted with the agitation they both felt. In her hands, Duda held a notebook where she had started to jot down everything she had witnessed in Clarice's classes. Andrei's gaze was fixed on the pages, but his mind wandered among the accounts of other students. "Look at this, Andrei," Duda began, turning the page of her notebook. "These are the testimonies I've gathered so far. Most students I talk to don't feel comfortable speaking in front of the teacher. She just ignores them or makes jokes." Andrei frowned, worried. "I didn't realize it was that bad. Are you sure this is going to work? Clarice is the teacher and she has power here. I'm not sure we have a chance." Duda took a deep breath, determined. "If we don't speak up, who will? People need to know the truth. If we do nothing, we'll keep being silenced. We need to document everything." "Okay, but what if she finds out? What if she tries to take revenge on you?" Andrei hesitated, concerned about the consequences. "Then we need to be smart. If we gather enough evidence, she won't be able to just ignore it. Look, we already have some students willing to join us. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us who have been disrespected," Duda replied, jotting down more information in her notebook. The tension in Clarice's classroom increased each day. One morning, Duda was preparing for a presentation on a topic she knew was delicate. As she stood up to speak, she noticed Clarice watching her with a critical gaze. It was as if the teacher was waiting for a mistake, an opportunity to undermine her effort. During the presentation, Duda spoke with passion and clarity, but at the end, Clarice didn't hesitate to deliver one of her typical barbs. "Duda, it's admirable that you've read so much, but do you really understand what you're saying? Sometimes just reading isn't enough to grasp the true struggle. You have to live it." Murmurs filled the classroom and Duda felt the heat rising in her face. Maintaining her composure, she calmly replied, "I understand that experience is valuable, Professor, but that doesn't diminish the importance of research and knowledge. We all have the right to learn and express our opinions." Clarice smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Be careful, Duda. Sometimes passion can cloud reason." Duda felt a rising anger, but she decided not to let it shake her. "Reason shouldn't be used to silence voices that need to be heard, Professor. The fight for equality is a responsibility for all of us." As soon as class ended, Duda quickly left, her heart racing. She met Andrei in the hallway, where the tension still pulsed. "You were amazing," Andrei exclaimed, excited. "I knew you could stand your ground like that." "But that was just the beginning," Duda replied, looking around, worried that Clarice might be nearby. "I need to document more incidents. This conversation just made me more determined." The two moved away, discussing their next steps. Duda felt she was heading in the right direction, but Clarice's sarcastic words echoed in her mind. She knew she had to be prepared for what would come next. Deep down, Duda understood that the fight was just beginning, and the courage she had found was only a step toward the truth that needed to be revealed. Duda sat at her desk, nervous as she watched the students enter the room. The day had arrived. She was going to present her project on racial equality, a topic so dear to her that had required weeks of research and preparation. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she couldn't ignore the butterflies in her stomach at the thought of Clarice watching her with a critical gaze, as if waiting for her to make a mistake. "Are you ready, Duda?" Andrei whispered, sitting next to her, his expression worried. She nodded, trying to project confidence, but doubt still lingered in her mind. "Just remember, you're doing this for all of us." When the bell rang, Duda stood up and walked to the board, taking a deep breath. The room fell silent, her classmates' attention fixed on her. "Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about racial equality and the importance of recognizing and combating prejudice in schools," she began, her voice trembling slightly but firm. Clarice, already seated at her desk, crossed her arms, a sarcastic smile on her face. "I hope you did more in-depth research than last time," she interrupted, disdainful. "The struggle you mention isn't so simple, Duda." "In fact, Clarice, that's exactly what I'm trying to show," Duda responded, regaining her footing after the AT. "The struggle is complex but no less important. We need to understand what's at stake. The voices of minorities are often silenced." She pointed to a chart showing the racial disparity in school approval rates. The students began to murmur, some nodding, others with looks of doubt. Duda felt she was starting to capture their attention. However, Clarice wasn't willing to let that slide. "And you really believe this will change anything? Projects like yours are just words on paper, Duda," she scoffed, provoking nervous reactions in the room. Duda took a deep breath, holding her gaze. "Change starts with awareness, Clarice. If we don't talk about it, we'll never know. And if what I'm doing is just words, then so be it. I wish you would join us in this fight instead of trying to discredit what you don't understand." Clarice laughed, but some students began to speak up. "I agree with Duda," said a girl named Louisa. "She's right. If we don't talk about this, we'll never change anything." "Yeah, we need to hear all voices," Andre added, supporting Duda. The mood in the room began to shift, and Duda could feel she was gaining allies. Clarice, realizing her strategy wasn't working, frowned, but decided to remain silent, at least for now. Duda continued her presentation, now more confident. She brought up stories of injustice, highlighting historical figures who fought for equality and the devastating effects of racism. The students became more engaged, and the atmosphere in the room grew increasingly positive. As she concluded, Duda smiled and looked at her classmates. "We need to unite against prejudice, not just in school but everywhere. Together we can make a difference." The room erupted in applause, and Duda felt a wave of relief and joy. However, Clarice's smile had not V. She was clearly irritated, but the teacher seemed a little taken aback, which brought a slight smile to Duda's face. "I didn't expect this from you, Duda," Clarice said, trying to maintain her composure. "But I just hope you don't forget that not everyone shares your worldview." "Don't worry, Clarice," Duda replied with a determined expression, "but that won't stop me from fighting for what's right." Duda realized that the support from her classmates was a powerful force, and that even in the face of Clarice's disdain, her voice was being heard. The battle was just beginning, but she felt stronger than ever. Duda was determined to expose Clarice's discriminatory behavior, but she knew the teacher wouldn't go down without a fight. The next day, when the young woman entered the classroom, the atmosphere was even tenser. Clarice, with a cold look, prepared to start the lesson. Duda felt a chill run down her spine. She already knew that the teacher wouldn't easily accept being confronted. As classes began, Clarice made a venomous comment. "Oh, Duda, could you give us a sample of your project on racial equality? Or would that be too complicated for you?" The entire room stopped to listen, and all eyes turned to Duda. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Actually, Clarice, I'm here to learn and contribute to the discussion just like everyone else," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Clarice rolled her eyes and continued with the lesson, but Duda sensed that the teacher was preparing to retaliate. After class, Duda met Andre in the hallway. "Did you see her face? She's clearly planning something," Duda said, concern evident in her tone. Andre nodded, his expression serious. "I don't know what she'll do, but we need to stay alert. What do you think she might pull?" Duda bit her lower lip, thinking, "She's going to try to embarrass me. That's what people like her do when they feel threatened." The following day, Clarice started creating embarrassing situations. During a group activity, she assigned Duda to a project that all the students were disinterested in, and when the young girl began to present her ideas, Clarice interrupted. "Duda, that's not what we're discussing. You really should have paid more attention in class," she remarked, and the room filled with nervous laughter. Duda felt small, but decided not to let it get her down. However, Clarice's retaliations did not go unnoticed. A group of students started to gather around Duda, discussing the teacher's behavior and how they could help her. "We need to do something. We can't let her keep acting like this," said Mariana, a student who had always admired Duda's courage. "I heard rumors that she's had problems at other schools because of her behavior. We need to find out more." Duda felt a warmth in her chest, realizing she wasn't alone. They began meeting after school in the library, creating a safe space to discuss their experiences and plan actions. "Let's collect stories from other students who have also suffered from the teacher," suggested Andre, looking at Duda with a determined expression. "We need evidence." The idea of collecting accounts began to gain traction among them, and Duda felt more hopeful. "This could work. If we can gather enough evidence, we can take it to the administration. It's time to make Clarice see that her actions have consequences," declared Duda, her voice steady. Everyone nodded, and a new sense of unity arose among them. That night, Duda was at home reflecting on everything that had happened. The tension between her and Clarice had escalated, but the thought that other students were also willing to fight by her side filled her with courage. Helena, her mother, noticed the change in her daughter's demeanor. "Duda, you seem different. What's going on?" she asked with concern. Duda hesitated, but decided to open her heart. "Mum, Ms. Clarice is being unfair to me and other students. I want to do something about it, but I'm scared." Helena smiled encouragingly. "You are a strong and brave young woman. Don't let fear stop you from fighting for what's right. I will be here to support you." Duda felt a wave of gratitude. With her mother's and friends' support, she felt she could face any challenge that Clarice presented. At school, Clarice began to notice that her intimidation tactics were not working as she had hoped. Duda was rallying other students, and the atmosphere around her was changing. The teacher then decided to intensify her tactics, but Duda and her friends were ready to face whatever came their way. The truth was about to emerge, and Duda wouldn't let silence prevent her from fighting for justice. Duda looked around the library, her heart racing. The room, usually silent and filled with focused students, was now buzzing with whispers and knowing glances. She had organized the clandestine meeting with a clear purpose: to discuss how they could confront the tyranny disguised as education that Ms. Clarice Almeida represented. For many, the situation was unbearable, and Duda knew it was time to act. The students began to settle at the tables, forming a circle. Duda climbed onto a chair, her posture straight, and determination etched on her face. "Thank you all for being here. We know that the situation with Ms. Clarice is no longer acceptable. We can't stay silent while she continues to disrespect and belittle students. We need to raise our voices together." Andre, who was standing next to Duda, stepped forward. "I know this is scary, but it's not just the two of us in this fight. Everyone here has felt the weight of her words, and it's time to show that we will no longer tolerate this." A girl named Luana, sitting in the front row, hesitantly raised her hand. "But what if she finds out? What will happen to us? She might retaliate, and it could harm us." Duda took a deep breath. She knew that fear was a difficult barrier to break. "I understand what you're saying, Luana, but if we stay quiet, we're just feeding the problem. We need to protect each other. If we stand together, we will be stronger. No one can silence us if we are united." A murmur of agreement spread among the students. The tension was palpable, but determination began to fill the atmosphere. Duda continued, "We need to collect evidence. If we can document the incidents, we'll have a real chance to ask for action against the teacher. Each of us can contribute what we know. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us." Andre nodded, encouraging the idea. "We could create a messaging group where everyone shares their experiences. That way we can compile everything quickly and see what else we find." "And what if we find more students willing to join us?" suggested Pedro, a quiet student who had remained silent until now. "Maybe we could do a petition or something similar." "That's a great idea, Pedro," Duda exclaimed, her enthusiasm contagious. "We need to show that the community is on our side. If we can get support from more people, it will be harder for the school to ignore our voices." The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The students exchanged looks, the idea of unity starting to take root. "Duda, are you willing to be the spokesperson for this?" asked Andre, admiration shining in his eyes. "You've always been so brave." "I will do it," Duda replied, feeling a wave of responsibility and power. "But I need all of you by my side. We can't let this become just another case of silence and fear." The whispers intensified, and Duda realized that the flame of determination was lit. "So, let's meet again next week. Each of you should bring your experiences, and together, we'll plan our next action. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone who has suffered at Clarice's hands." Before the meeting ended, a student named Lucas, who had always been reserved, stood up. "I want to help." Duda knew that the fight was just beginning, but now she was not alone. The truth was starting to emerge from the shadows of silence. The atmosphere in the boardroom was thick with tension. Duda sat at the table, her heart pounding in her chest, while Andre, beside her, tried to convey confidence with a gentle squeeze of her hand. The director, Mrs. Costa, had her eyes fixed on them. She was an imposing woman, but Duda was determined not to be intimidated. "Good morning, Duda, Andre. What do you have to say about the allegations against Professor Clarice?" Mrs. Costa began, adjusting her glasses at the tip of her nose. Her voice was firm, but Duda noticed a slight tremor. The pressure was on her. Duda took a deep breath, allowing courage to take over. "Good morning, Mrs. Costa. Thank you for meeting with us. We have some evidence that shows the discriminatory behavior of Professor Clarice. I've compiled reports from several students who felt disrespected by her in the classroom. The director gestured for Duda to continue, and she opened her folder, pulling out several copies of anonymous statements. Here are the accounts. Many students felt demotivated and humiliated, especially when the professor belittles their contributions in class. For example, one student mentioned that Clarice said only the hard-working should stand out, implying that students of other races were incapable. Andre, sensing that Duda needed support, interjected. Additionally, the professor often ignores the correct answers given by Duda and other black students while praising white students, even when their answers are wrong. This creates a hostile and unequal environment. Mrs. Costa stared intently at the papers, her face impassive, but Duda noticed. But I would also like to hear Professor Clarice's side of the story. Duda felt a chill in her stomach. She knew Clarice wouldn't hesitate to defend herself. I understand, but we hope you will consider the evidence we have before hearing her defense. At that moment, the door swung open and Clarice entered wearing a disdainful expression. She looked at Duda and Andre, a sarcastic smile on her lips. "Oh, how nice to see you here, Duda. I hope you brought something more substantial than hallway gossip." The tension in the room escalated. Duda felt her anger rising but kept her composure. "These aren't rumors, Professor. These are accounts from students who felt disrespected and discriminated against. We're here to ensure the truth is heard." Clarice tilted her head, dismissive. "And you really believe a handful of unfounded complaints can dismantle a career built through hard work? I'm sorry, Duda, but you're getting involved." Costa intervened, trying to restore order. "Professor Clarice, let's please keep the focus. Duda, you may continue." Duda didn't hesitate. "I also brought recordings of classes and testimonies from students who witnessed your racist comments. What do you have to say about that, Professor?" Clarice, now visibly irritated, crossed her arms. "Those recordings could easily be taken out of context. I am an educator and have always sought the best for my students. This is an attempt to undermine my—" The director, sensing the conflict escalating, called for calm. "Thank you both for your input. We will review this evidence and make a fair decision." "A fair decision?" Duda couldn't contain her indignation. "Fair would be recognizing that discrimination isn't a matter of interpretation, but of action. And your actions have consequences, Professor." Clarice, furious, shot Duda a disdainful look. "You're very confident, young lady, but don't forget that truth is a matter of perspective. That's what we're seeking here." Duda felt the strength of her words resonate in the room, and she realized Andre was firmly by her side. Mrs. Costa, visibly shaken by the confrontation, looked at the two students. "Let's adjourn this meeting for now. We will review all the statements and then make a decision." Duda and Andre stood up, their hearts racing with the adrenaline of the fight. They knew they were just beginning the battle, but the feeling that the truth was on its way to being revealed propelled them forward. The tension in the school was palpable. Conversations in the hallways were no longer about tests and parties, but about Duda and her fight against discrimination. Meanwhile, Clarice, realizing her power was waning, decided to make one last desperate move. In a moment of panic, she began to tarnish Duda's image on social media, creating anonymous posts aimed at discrediting the young girl. "Look at who thinks she's the hero of the school," read one of the posts, accompanied by a photo of Duda during a presentation, with nasty comments about her appearance and background. Clarice thought that by exposing Duda this way, she could turn the situation to her advantage. What she didn't expect was that the students' reaction would be entirely the opposite. The next day, the school was in an uproar. Students gathered in small groups, discussing the posts and the injustice Duda was facing. Andre, with a worried look, searched for Duda in the library, where she was sitting at a table surrounded by some supportive classmates. "Duda, did you see what Clarice posted?" Andre said, his voice trembling. "This is outrageous." Duda looked at him, her expression determined. "Yes, I saw, but it just shows how desperate she is. We can't let this stop us from fighting." The students around her nodded in agreement. "We need to do something. We can't let Clarice win," said a girl with curly hair who was sitting next to Duda. Duda, taking a deep breath, felt the strength of solidarity surrounding her. "Let's organize a peaceful protest. We need to show that we stand united and that we do not accept this kind of behavior." The murmurs of support quickly turned into plans. The students began creating posters and spreading the idea on social media. The protest would be an act of unity, a cry against discrimination and oppression. On the day of the protest, the school felt different. Students with colorful posters gathered in the courtyard, some with phrases like "Say no to prejudice" and "The voice of truth cannot be silenced." Duda, at the center of the movement, felt her heart race as she watched the crowd form. It was a moment of collective empowerment. Meanwhile, Clarice watched from a distance, her face filled with anger and frustration. "This is a disgrace," she muttered to herself as she saw her students rallying in support of Duda. "I can't believe this is happening." Duda climbed onto a wooden crate to address the crowd. Her voice, initially hesitant, soon grew stronger. "Thank you all for being here. We are fighting for something greater than just a classroom. We are fighting for equality, respect, and justice." The applause echoed among the students, and Duda's confidence grew. "Discrimination has no place in our school. We all deserve to be treated with dignity regardless of our skin color, background, or anything else." It was at that moment that Clarice decided to intervene. With an authoritative look, she approached the group, trying to intimidate Duda. "This is not the place for an unruly meeting, Duda. You're causing a division among the students." Duda did not let herself be shaken. "We are not causing division, Clarice. We are seeking unity. You are the one dividing the school with your prejudices." Duda's words resonated strongly, and the crowd applauded even louder. Clarice, realizing she had lost control of the situation, tried to defend herself, but her voice was drowned out by the clamor of the students. "We are here to support truth and justice," shouted one of the students, raising their sign. "Enough of silencing those who have the courage to speak out." In the face of that show of support, Clarice felt isolated, and her strategy of attack backfired. The strength of the students' solidarity not only illuminated Duda's path, but also made it clear that the fight against prejudice was just beginning. With each shout and each sign raised, the truth and courage of Duda became more visible, echoing through the school's walls and in the minds of everyone present. Tension hung in the air as Duda anxiously awaited the outcome of the investigation into Clarice. The administration had promised a swift response, but the pressure of the situation made every second feel like an eternity. That day, the school buzzed with murmurs and curious glances. Students were divided between supporting Duda and doubting her claims, gathering in the hallways. The bell rang, and everyone headed to the meeting room where the administration would make an announcement. Duda sat next to Andre, her gaze fixed on the table where the board members were seated. The tension was palpable. The principal, a middle-aged man with grey hair, finally stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your patience during this process. After a thorough investigation into the allegations made by student Maria Eduarda, and with the collaboration of other students, we have a verdict." The silence in the room was deafening. Duda felt her heart race. The investigation revealed that teacher Clarice Almeida has a history of discriminatory behavior and abuse of power in the classroom. Therefore, we have decided that the teacher will be suspended indefinitely. The principal paused, allowing the words to sink in. A murmur of surprise and approval swept through the room. Duda exchanged a meaningful glance with Andre, who encouraged her with a smile. "This is incredible, Duda. You did it," he whispered, and Duda smiled back, though anxiety still consumed her. "I would like to invite Maria Eduarda to speak," the principal continued, and the room turned to Duda. With a gentle push from Andre, she stood and walked to the center, feeling the weight of her peers' gazes. The room was packed, and the pressure to speak made her hesitate for a moment. But looking at her mother, Helena, who sat in the front row with an encouraging expression, Duda found the courage. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "When I entered this school, I never imagined I would have to fight for something as basic as respect. I'm grateful to everyone who stood by me. This fight is not just mine, but for everyone who has ever felt invisible." Applause began to rise, and Duda felt the power of supportive voices around her. "We need to remember that education should be a safe and welcoming space for all, regardless of skin color, background, or religion. No one should have to go through what I went through." She looked directly at the administration, who were watching her with appreciation. Students began to stand one by one, and Duda realized the room was mobilizing. "We are with you, Duda," shouted one student, and soon the chorus of support grew, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of solidarity. Meanwhile, Clarice, standing apart, watched the scene unfold with eyes that reflected her defeat. She was no longer the authority figure she once was, but an isolated woman, burdened by guilt and shame. Hearing Duda's words, her face contorted in a mix of anger and despair. "This isn't over," she murmured to herself, her heart filling with a venom she didn't know how to handle. After the meeting, the school organized a peaceful protest in support of Duda. Colorful banners with messages of equality and respect were raised by students and teachers, and the energy was infectious. Duda, now a recognized leader, stepped up to a small makeshift platform. "Today we have shown that together we are stronger. The fight against prejudice does not end here. It has only just begun. We will not let silence define us." The crowd cheered, and Duda felt that she was finally making a difference. The truth behind the silence had been revealed, and the quest for justice had found its voice. Deep down, Duda knew that her journey was just beginning, but now she not only had courage, but also a united community by her side. A few weeks later, the school honored Duda in a special ceremony, where she received an award for her courage and resilience. "You are an inspiration, Duda," the principal said as he handed her the award. "You not only challenged an injustice, but became the voice for many who could not express themselves." With tears in her eyes, Duda looked at her mother, who was beaming with pride. "This isn't just mine, it's ours," she replied, referring to everyone who had supported her. "Change begins with each of us." While Clarice, now unemployed and scorned, reflected on her actions at home, Duda took her place as a symbol of change, proving that truth and justice will always prevail. We have reached the end of this moving story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Right now, there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you want to continue watching these touching stories, just click on it to start. And now, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and leave a like to support our work. Now, a sincere question. Do you agree with what happened in the story? We want to hear your opinion. Until the next video, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. His voice was low but firm. The group buzzed with excitement at the declaration, a sign that change was truly beginning. Duda smiled, feeling empowered by the unity forming. "That's what I want to hear. Together we are stronger. Let's make our voices heard." With that, the meeting concluded. They all dispersed, but the feelings of solidarity and determination lingered in the air.